And in its creation, it was obvious the Attorney General is not a traditional member of the President's cabinet. Supreme Court Justice James Iredell observed in 1792 that the position is not called the Attorney General of the President, but the Attorney General of the United States. This is because an Attorney General's client is not the President. Attorney General's client is the American people. All of us. All of us. The Attorney General's duty is not to defend the President, but to uphold the rule of law and do so with integrity and independence. Now, we know that President Trump has a very different view. He views the office of Attorney General as an extension of his political power to be wielded like a weapon to further his agenda. He believes it exists to benefit him personally, to target his opponents, to protect him and his friends. And his view stands in stark contrast to everything the Attorney General is supposed to represent. It came as no surprise then that during his nomination hearing, Mr. Barr was questioned about which type of Attorney General he would be, the President's lawyer or an impartial pursuer of justice. Now, Mr. Barr was adamant in that hearing that while he may sympathize with the President's policy choices, his role as a policy advisor would be distinct from that of the nation's chief law enforcement officer. If confirmed, he assured all of us his job would not be to protect the President. Madam President, 30 years ago, I voted for Mr. Barr to serve as Attorney General to then President George H.W. Bush. I had my disagreements with him at that time, in fact, several. But I voted for him. But when I heard in late 2018 that President Trump intended to nominate him for a second tenure as Attorney General, frankly, I was hopeful. After the short yet disastrous tenure of a totally unqualified acting Attorney General, who eagerly bent to the will of President Trump, I was hopeful that Mr. Barr would restore some independence to the office. But after careful consideration and listening to his testimony at his nomination hearing, I voted no for his confirmation. Mr. Barr has long held expansive views of executive power. And prior to his nomination, he shared those views with this was prior to his nomination. He shared those views with the President in a bizarre 19-page memorandum, making the case that a president can obstruct a criminal investigation with near impunity. It was clear to me that Mr. Barr's views would be weaponized by President Trump, a man who derides any limits on his authority. The president, I said at that time, needs a much tighter leash. By any measure, the last 2 years have been worse than I feared. Time and again, Attorney General Barr has acted in the best interest of Donald Trump, not in the best interest of the country. He's intervened, he's overruled career prosecutors, only in cases to benefit the president and his friends. He's departed from department norms. He's misrepresented the department's work. He's eroded public trust in the department as a result, and I'll speak to just a handful of examples. In late 2019, a jury on overwhelming evidence convicted former Trump campaign advisor Roger Stone for obstructing a bipartisan congressional investigation and lying under oath and witness tampering. Evidence was overwhelming. The jury convicted him. So consistent with sentencing guidelines that apply to everybody, prosecutors recommended a 7 to 9 year sentence. President Trump immediately took to Twitter to criticize the prosecution. And just hours later, after he had tweeted his objections, Attorney General Barr intervened. He overruled the prosecutors. He disregarded the sentencing guidelines that are supposed to apply to anybody. What happened next reminded me of something Judge Michael Mukasey said when he testified in support of Mr. Barr at his confirmation hearing. Judge Mukasey said if Mr. Barr ever failed to serve with independence, he would find a mound of resignations on his desk. Well, in this instance, all 4 career prosecutors withdrew from the case. In fact, 2 resigned from the Justice Department altogether. And at sentencing, Judge Amy Berman Jackson took the rare step in defending both the career prosecutors and their sentencing recommendation. And she stated that it was true to the record. It was in accordance with law and Department of Justice policy. Attorney General Barr's intervention left me with just one question. Could anyone, other than the president's close friend, a man who, according to Judge Jackson, broke the law and was prosecuted for covering up for the president, receive such leniency from the Attorney General? I think the answer is pretty obvious. You're a friend of the president, the Attorney General is going to try to cover for you. Then there's former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. The Attorney General's intervention in the Flynn case went a step further. Despite the fact that Flynn had twice pled guilty to lying to the FBI, Mr. Barr's Justice Department moved to dismiss the case altogether, prompting the lead prosecutors to withdraw. The sentencing judge, Emmett Sullivan, ordered a review of the motion to drop the charges. He appointed a former federal judge, John Gleeson, to serve as an amicus curiae. Well, Judge Gleeson didn't mince words. He advised the court that Mr. Barr's grounds for seeking dismissal were conclusively disproven and amounted to, quote, an unconvincing effort to disguise as a legitimate a decision to dismiss that is based solely on the fact that Flynn is a political ally of President Trump. Not long afterward, President Trump fully pardoned Mr. Flynn from his conviction of the crime of lying. Now, many of Attorney General Barr's departures from department norms originated with his now infamous handling of the special counsel's report on Russian interference. The Mueller report amounted to a 448-page presentment of misconduct that reached the highest levels of the Trump campaign and administration. But the Attorney General's summary of the report, in fact, the only information he allowed the public to see for weeks, left Americans with the opposite impression that the report effectively exonerated the president, even though it did not. Special Counsel Mueller wrote to the Attorney General at the time, concerned that the Attorney General failed to capture his conclusions and created confusion, undermined public confidence in the investigation. Indeed, that appears to have been the Attorney General's intent, and many others agree. Federal Judge Reggie Walton wrote that the inconsistencies between his statements and the report caused the court to seriously question whether Attorney General Barr made a calculated attempt to influence public discourse about the Mueller report in favor of President Trump, despite findings in the redacted version of the Mueller report to the contrary. This remarkable statement from a sitting federal judge about a sitting attorney general is about as damning as it gets. Soon after, the attorney general began falsely claiming that the investigation was started without any basis and was politically motivated. That's despite the fact that an exhaustive inspector general's report refuted both of his claims. And the attorney general was not content with simply mischaracterizing the Russian investigation. He launched counter-investigation into the Justice Department's own investigators. He personally traveled to Italy in a desperate attempt to dig up exculpatory evidence. Ignoring department policies, he regularly commented on the ongoing investigation led by U.S. Attorney John Durham. And documents from the Durham investigation were even shared with the White House, according to the president's chief of staff. Then Durham's top aide abruptly resigned, reportedly due to pressure to release their findings before the election. In other words, they just broke all procedures because they wanted to help Donald Trump. And on top of that, the Attorney General did all this while he was ignoring a subpoena from the House of Representatives to obtain an unredacted copy of the Mueller report. In fact, Attorney General Barr has evaded transparency. He's impeded one standard congressional oversight, no matter the topic. He refused to testify before the House. He was held in contempt for refusing to respond to House subpoenas related to the administration's pretextual justification for adding a citizenship question to the census. He supported efforts to cover up President Trump's Ukraine scandal, for which the president was impeached. He supported the unprecedented purging of multiple independent inspectors general. And he rebuffed congressional oversight at every turn. Now, this may not bother some of my friends on the other side of the aisle now, but the political winds have already shifted. It harms all of us when congressional prerogatives are so blatantly disregarded. While Attorney General Barr defended President Trump at seemingly every turn, he went a step further in September by attempting to literally defend the president's personal interests. The Attorney General moved to intervene and dismiss a civil defamation case that alleged that President Trump lied about a decades-old sexual assault, and a federal court flatly rejected the attempt. And Attorney General Barr's interventions on behalf of the president extended beyond legal issues to PR issues as well. At the height of a national reckoning on issues of racial injustice, the White House stated that it was the Attorney General who ordered the clearing of peaceful protesters at Lafayette Square. Barr denied he gave the order, but he did not deny that he encouraged it. Peaceful protesters were cleared with rubber bullets and tear gas so the president could stage a photo op in front of St. John's Church. It was a grotesque display of unnecessary force. Most recently, the Attorney General's obedience to the president resulted in him falsely claiming that mail-in ballots that have been used since the Civil War and relied upon by millions of Americans during this pandemic opened the floodgates to widespread fraud. Voting experts described his claims as farcical. In echoing the president's conspiracy theories, the Attorney General revealed how little he knew about basic election laws and the safeguards in place. And his apparent intent was not to inform the public, but to sow doubt among the public about the integrity of their vote. Attorney General Barr then rewrote the department's policy on election-related investigations, prompting the head of the department's election crimes branch to resign his post in protest. For each of these actions, Attorney General Barr was publicly badgered by President Trump to act, publicly badgered by President Trump to act. Now, maybe the Attorney General Barr believes he withstood the pressure. There may be some lines that he declined to cross, such as fabricating evidence of widespread voter fraud. But we can never excuse all the lines he did cross. Critically, when a president pressures an attorney general to serve their personal interests, it's all the more incumbent on the nation's top law enforcement officer to avoid any appearance of impropriety and to refuse the request, not to meet him halfway. Now, it brings me no joy to say this. I've known Attorney General Barr for a long time. But he has failed in his duty to impartially and equally uphold the rule of law. The Attorney General represents the United States, all of the 330 million Americans. Too often, the Attorney General felt he was going to only represent the interests of just one person. By serving as a yes man, when the law and the country and the department needed him to say no, Attorney General Barr has damaged the hallowed office he's temporarily occupied. And now the hard work to repair the damage has to begin. In November, the country voted, the American people voted to take the country in a different direction. I served alongside President-elect Biden for decades in the Senate and on the Judiciary Committee. He understands the unique role of the Justice Department. I am convinced that President-elect Biden would never rely on the Justice Department to do his personal bidding the way President Trump has. No matter who the president-elect chooses as the next Attorney General, I have no doubt that he or she will operate with the utmost integrity, guided by the law and the facts. So as we begin to close the book on this dark chapter in our nation's history, with a pandemic that has left more than 310,000 Americans dead, with the outgoing president's relentless attacks on the foundations of our democracy, I'm hopeful that brighter days are ahead. I'm confident that we will again have government leaders focused on following the evidence and adhering to the rule of law, pursuing equal justice, acting in the best interests of the nation, all of us, not just of one person. The thousands of hardworking and dedicated men and women of the Justice Department deserve at least this much, as do all Americans. Indeed, the founding principles and traditions of the 230-year-old office of the Attorney General demand nothing less. Madam President, as there's nobody else seeking the floor right at the moment, let me just mention a personal observation. As a young law student at Georgetown, I was invited along with 3 or 4 other law students from different leading law schools. We were invited to meet with the then Attorney General. We were probably diverse in our opinions, but we were asked to be there because of our academic standing in our classes. And I remember sitting there with the Attorney General, and like it was yesterday. He talked about the meaning of the Department of Justice and how we have to represent the whole country, how it has to stand for the law. And one of us, and it may have been a young law student from Vermont, asked the question, well, what if you had somebody who had broken the law, but they were close to the president? What would you do? He said, if they'd broken the law, we would prosecute them. He said, I might not be welcome at family gatherings for a while thereafter. He said that because that Attorney General was Robert Kennedy. His brother was the president. And actually that happened. A man very close and important to his brother's election as president. Matter was brought to Attorney General Kennedy, recommending his prosecution. And of course, he was prosecuted. That's what an Attorney General should be. I declined his offer to join the Department of Justice because my wife, Marcel, and I wanted to go back home to Vermont. And I thought probably I'd never be involved in law enforcement after that. A few years later, I was the state's attorney of a county that had about a quarter of our population. And I was quickly faced with prosecuting leading Democrats and leading Republicans in our state. I remember Attorney General Kennedy said, prosecutor has to represent everybody. The prosecutor has to uphold the law. And I prosecuted those people. I've never regretted that. I've always been supportive of attorneys general who uphold the law. Uphold the law because they're there to represent all Americans. And Madam President, as long as I'm in the Senate, I will always speak out when an attorney general does not do the job they're supposed to do. And when the attorney general does not apply the law equally and fairly to all people, applying the law, not politics. Madam President, I yield the floor and suggest you have to the court.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Alexander.
You are tuning into live coverage here on HAPS television. I am Cameron Sadeghi here rebroadcasting from C-SPAN, the United States Senate session here on Saturday morning Pacific time, and it's Saturday Eastern Standard Time in the afternoon out in Washington, D.C. You just heard Democrat Senator Patrick Leahy from Vermont criticize Attorney General William Barr's record. In his speech, Senator Leahy called Attorney General Barr a political, he called Attorney General Barr a political ally of President Trump. More talks coming up on the COVID-19 economic relief bill. If there is no deal reached by 12:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time Monday morning, so that would be 9 p.m. Pacific Sunday night, 12:01 a.m. Monday morning, the government will shut down. The federal government will shut down. So we are still listening to these talks. They're expected to go on throughout the whole weekend. Today, according to the C-SPAN schedule, the U.S. Senate is going to be in session for all the way up till 3 o'clock p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today. So that is the news here right now regarding this Senate session, U.S. Senate session here on Saturday. In other COVID-19 news, as you heard yesterday, Vice President Mike Pence getting vaccinated along with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. We are already seeing elected officials receiving the vaccine. And that is the status in terms of elected officials and the COVID-19 vaccine. The coronavirus economic aid package, there's been a lot of debate. Should it be $1,200 checks to American adults? Should it be $600? There's still a lot of debate ongoing here in the United States Senate. You're tuning into live coverage earlier today. As you see, C-SPAN is showcasing earlier floor speeches as you see on your screen, Senate Majority Leader Republican Mitch McConnell speaking there, but that's not live. That was earlier today. We're still waiting for more senators to speak in regards to COVID-19 economic aid. If you joined the broadcast yesterday, it was really interesting. I live streamed this and did a simulcast of this U.S. Senate session yesterday, and you had Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Ron Johnson discuss the Republican Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, and you had Senator Bernie Sanders, the independent from Vermont, discussing COVID-19 aid. You had Senator Sanders talking about $1,200 checks, to 1,200 direct checks to American adults. Senator Ron Johnson, the Republican, disagrees with Senator Bernie Sanders on that issue. He believes that it will drive up the deficit and that the amount of government spending required to accomplish that would be too much. And he even said that it would be, quote, mortgaging our children's future. So mortgaging our children's future. Those were the words of Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin yesterday. It was a pretty interesting moment between Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Ron Johnson on that issue. So we are still awaiting here. It is 31 minutes after the hour here on HAPS Television. Thank you so much for tuning in to this broadcast here on HAPS Television. Please check out my broadcast. Please subscribe. I would love to hear, I would love if you subscribe to my channel. It would be amazing. I would really appreciate it. I hope you're enjoying all of the other shows here on HAPS Television. There are so many broadcasters here. Hello, Joanne, how are you? And also, Jay, hello, how are you? Thank you so much for tuning in. So if you've just joined us now, COVID-19 aid talk going on in the Senate. We just heard a last speech that did not have to do with COVID-19. That was Senator Patrick Leahy talking about Attorney General William Barr. So that was unrelated to the COVID-19 economic aid, but there's still other talk. It's not just economic aid being discussed here at the Senate session. There is talk of judicial and executive nominations as well, and debate of judicial and executive nominations. So it's not just about coronavirus economic aid. So just want to note that. I know a lot of the headlines are solely focus on the coronavirus economic aid, and that is important. But the United States Senate, they're not just talking about that issue today. Thank you, Jay. Oh, let me put this comment here on the screen. That's great. That's great, Jay. Thank you so much for tuning in. Jay with another comment as we await for another senator to speak. England just went to tier 4 lockdown due to new mutation discovered of COVID-19. Christmas canceled in the UK. Thank you for that. I'm going to check that as well. That's really interesting. Thank you so much for that information. Oh, I need to say this is pretty interesting news. I had mentioned earlier that Vice President Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi received the vaccine. Or Vice President Mike Pence and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi received the vaccine yesterday. Mitch McConnell also received the vaccine as well. Yesterday, I forgot to mention that. Yes, Republican Senator, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell also received the vaccine. I just wanted to make that clear for all of you here. We got a question here. Has Trump received the vaccine? Well, Mike Pence has received it, but it is not apparent that President Trump has received the vaccine. There was a report 2 days ago. That's the headline reads from CNN Politics that President Trump won't be getting the vaccine until it's recommended by his own medical team. But there's no news that I can see of right now that President Trump that President Trump himself was vaccinated. So that hopefully that answered your question. There. Question from YouTube. So when are they supposed to vote on the COVID relief? So basically, if no, as I said earlier, if no conclusion, if no deal is reached by 12:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the government shuts down. So they have to vote soon here for the COVID-19 stimulus. There's talk that they're going to vote on Sunday. So right now it's Saturday. They're still discussing the details. But there should, if they do not come to a conclusion, if they do not come to a vote, then like a vote solidifying the details of the COVID-19 relief, then the government will shut down. So thank you for your question. So right now, and maybe if I can, hopefully I can better answer your question with this information. This is coming from CNBC.com live updates. So basically, yesterday, all the talk about the last minute emergency funding on Friday. So that was to stop a government shutdown from occurring, so that there would be another round of negotiations. So yesterday, they had to approve some emergency funding so that they could end up now having these negotiations here that you're going to be seeing here on rebroadcasted from C-SPAN. So that hopefully, again, when are they supposed to vote? I do not have the set time of when they're going to vote, but again, hopefully that answers your question. There's still a lot of talk and a lot of debate and conversation to be had here on the floor of the Senate. Tomorrow, the House will meet tomorrow on Sunday. The House will meet at noon Eastern. Thank you so much, Jay. So again, the House will meet tomorrow on Sunday at noon Eastern Standard Time. And according to CNBC, they say that the vote will not be earlier than 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday. So again, it's going to be a while on Sunday, and that's definitely going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Hopefully I can broadcast for you on Sunday as well, so you can see the vote and you can see more of the discussion and about this critical COVID-19 economic aid package. So again, this is for a full year funding and coronavirus relief package. So full year funding that is going to continue to be discussed. And in regards to the coronavirus relief package, there's so much conversation. Should it be the $600 stimulus checks? Should it be $1,200? There's so much debate here. You hear from the fiscal conservatives like Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, who said yesterday, look at the deficit. And then you have, progressives like Senator Bernie Sanders, who talk about the fact that an economic stimulus is necessary because due to America's growing economic inequality. So there are many different facets of the conversation, many different perspectives of this debate here. So again, we have to await how all of it plays out, and it's going to continue to be played out. But again, if you're just joining us, and thank you, Alex, for coming onto the for commenting here. There's still a lot to be discussed here. And then you also have here in this Senate session, discussion and debate of judicial and executive nominations as well. So all of these topics and all of these things coming all together here. And then we have a comment here from Reddit. Thank you from Reddit. Look at them try to pass a stimulus right before evictions are about to come. I think, and thank you for your comments. Interesting perspective. I'm not here trying to deliver opinions and commentary, but what I would say is, from an analysis perspective, that could certainly be true. I mean, that's definitely, a more skeptical view. I think you could also say from another perspective is that there are so many different competing interests. The U.S. Senate is pretty divided. I mean, yes, Republicans have the majority, but it's really close. And then you have these Senate runoffs coming. So there's a lot of polarization. There are a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different views on this. It's not as if there is a super majority of one party and no resistance whatsoever. And the stimulus can be passed easily. The United States Senate currently right now is, pretty evenly divided. Yes, Republicans have a slight majority, but that does not mean that they can run free, that they can just, do what they want without any resistance. They still have to convince others. And then you also have, Republican Josh Hawley, disagreeing with members of his own party. There's so many competing interests. There's so many factions involved, not just in politics, but especially in the U.S. Senate at this specific time, that it's going to be definitely a difficult process to pass the stimulus right away, due to the amount of perspectives on the Senate floor right now on this issue. Hello from Atlanta. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. We're still awaiting a senator to speak here on the United States Senate floor, rebroadcasted from C-SPAN. C-SPAN allows anyone to rebroadcast their streams from the Senate and House floor or White House events. Let's go full screen, or now we're going full screen as a senator is going to speak. Let's listen in to the United States Senate floor.
Terms coming to a close, and yet again, this Senate, the President Washington has failed to address the pension crisis facing far too many workers. The American people are tired of waiting for us to do our jobs. They're tired of being told by Leader McConnell and President Trump, you're on your own. The House has twice passed legislation that would address the
Sorry about that technical error. Let's get back to the senator from Ohio, Sherrod Brown.
C-SPAN is not federally funded. It's thanks to the cable and satellite companies that provide our public service.
solve this crisis for years. The House has done its part. They've passed a solution multiple times now. Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Senate, is deliberately blocking it, and his party and his members and the president support him in blocking it. Senate Republicans said this week that after a year of negotiating and talking to stakeholders, they've made substantial progress towards a common ground. But then they released legislation that walked back all the progress that we had made. It's a betrayal of the people whom we serve. This pension crisis affects retirees across the country of all political parties. Unions, the chambers of commerce, small businesses, pretty much all agree we need to get this done. Unfortunately, Mitch McConnell doesn't. There's no excuse for Senate Republicans standing in the way of a deal. This only gets more expensive the longer we wait. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to solve this. We've waited year after year after year while Senator McConnell has simply twiddled his thumbs. The public health crisis, the economic crisis we're facing right now are not happening in a vacuum. The damage caused by the pandemic and the president's failures is layered on top of all the existing problems in our country, including the crisis facing these workers and retirees who are in danger of losing the retirement security that they earned. I always emphasize that they earned. These pension plans were already in danger. Now the economic emergency we're in has put them in a worse position. We're talking about retirees who did everything right. They spent years working on assembly lines, bagging groceries, driving trucks, working construction, working hard to keep our economy going. Money came out of every single one of their paychecks to earn these pensions. People in this town don't understand the collective bargaining process. People give up dollars today at the bargaining table for the promise of a secure retirement with good health care and a pension. Think about that. These workers sitting around a table with their representatives, collectively bargaining with management, saying, okay, we'll take a smaller salary, we'll take a smaller wage today, a smaller hourly wage, so that money will go into pensions and health care. Yet, because this Senate won't act, because Senator McConnell never calls us together to do this, to take care of workers, these workers are losing parts of their pension. This crisis in my state affects thousands of people. It affects the massive Central States Pension Plan, Bricklayers Local 7, Iron Workers Local 17, the Ohio Southwest Carpenters Pension Plan, the Bakers and Confectionery Pension Plan, and on and on and on and on. And it touches every single state, from Mississippi to Ohio, from Massachusetts to California, every state in this country. We're talking about our entire multi-employer pension system. If it collapses, it won't just be retirees who will feel the pain. Current workers will be stuck paying into pensions they'll never receive. Small businesses will be left drowning in pension liability they can't afford to pay. Small businesses have been in the family for generations, and there are a number of them in Ohio, businesses people in this body will have heard of, that make products they use. Small businesses, family businesses could face bankruptcy. Workers will lose jobs as businesses forced to close up shop. And the effect will ripple across the entire economy at a time when we can least afford it. We knew before this pandemic this system could collapse. It's only more likely to fail now. That's why the Senate must act. We know who will get hurt the most if the system collapses. It's not Wall Street. It's never Wall Street when it comes to Senator McConnell. It's never Wall Street that gets hurt. It's small businesses, it's their employees, it's the people who make this country work. Their lives, their livelihoods will be devastated if Congress fails again. Workers and retirees in Ohio and around the country have rallied in the name of Butch Lewis, a great Ohioan who helped lead this fight, who passed away far too soon fighting for his fellow workers. His widow, Rita, has become my friend. She's continued this fight. She's become a leader and an inspiration to so many of us. I brought her to the State of the Union twice. She's made the trip here over and over, along with so many workers and retirees. They've traveled all day and all night on buses. They've rallied outside in the bitter cold of the winter and the hot DC summers. And still their government, their majority leader, their president, refused to listen and turn their backs. Rita once told me that retirees and workers struggling with this crisis, she said, they feel like they are invisible. They feel like they are invisible. To far too many people in Washington, they are invisible. They're not invisible to me. They're not invisible to Speaker Pelosi or Leaders Schumer or Senator Smith or Senator Peters or Chairman Neal or Chairman Scott, all of whom have joined with me in fighting on this, and so many other colleagues who've worked for years now trying to find a bipartisan solution. We don't give up until these retirees' benefits are protected. It comes back, Madam President, to the dignity of work. When work has dignity, we honor the security, the retirement security that people earned. Again, sitting down at the bargaining table, workers give up wages today to put money aside, matched by employers generally, for the future, for this retirement. So they made the right decision back then, but we're not making the right decision right now as their pensions are in trouble. I urge my colleagues in this body, colleagues with health care and retirement plans paid for by taxpayers, all of us who are in this body, to think about these retired workers and the stress they're facing. Join us. Let's pass a solution that honors their work. Let's honor their work. Let's honor the dignity of work. Let's, Madam President, keep our promise to them. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
You are tuning in to live coverage here on HAPS television. You just heard Senator Sherrod Brown, the Democrat from Ohio, giving his view of the
The Senate is
COVID-19.
in a quorum call, waiting for a senator to come to the floor to speak. Members today considering judicial and executive branch nominations. Last night, both the House and Senate approved a 2-day resolution to keep the government funded until midnight Sunday. Lawmakers are working on both a long-term spending deal and a COVID-19 relief package. You're watching live Senate coverage here on C-SPAN 2.
Well, I guess the C-SPAN announcer did my job for me. Hi, everyone. Welcome to HAPS Television, rebroadcasting from C-SPAN 2, here with the Saturday U.S. Senate session, as you have just probably tuned in to hear the thoughts and the view that each individual senator has on the coronavirus economic aid package. Hold on, the screen's loading. I need to fix it one more time.
Are of need in every moment of danger, who have sent their sons and daughters.
Okay, thank you for tuning it in. Thank you for tuning in, everyone, to this broadcast. I'm Cameron Sadeghi. I'm still navigating the screen sharing and still getting used to it here on HAPS TV. I've made some, I've had a little bit of technical difficulties. I think I've figured it out now. So what you're looking at on your screen is a rebroadcast from C-SPAN 2. We're hearing from senators in regards to the COVID-19 economic aid package. We also heard earlier today from Democrat Senator Patrick Leahy giving his thoughts on Attorney General William Barr's record. So again, we have the coronavirus aid talk. We also have discussion of executive and judicial nominations as well here on the Senate floor happening today. They're going to be in session today all the way up till 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So pretty long Saturday for U.S. senators here. And then tomorrow, they're going to have a big day, a really big day to figure out the final details of the coronavirus economic aid relief if no deal is reached by Monday morning, 12:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9:01 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Sunday night, then the federal government will shut down. So these are critical debates being had here in regards to the federal funding and the funding of the coronavirus economic aid package. And you are tuning in, waiting. We're all waiting for another senator to speak on this issue. Thanks everyone for tuning in to this broadcast. I really appreciate it. Yesterday, I gave this a try and rebroadcasted from C-SPAN as well. The debates being had, if you were here, it was really interesting. The conversation between Senator Bernie Sanders and the independent senator from Bernie Sanders and Republican Senator Ron Johnson, which was it was fascinating to see them go back and forth debating on how much the stimulus should be and their philosophical views as well. It was not just about what they think of this specific issue, but why they think why they believe in what they believe in on a philosophical level. You heard, Ron Johnson yesterday talk about how it's that, yes, Americans need help, but we have to also be cognizant of the deficit of the U.S. national debt. And then you heard Senator Bernie Sanders, who challenged Senator Ron Johnson, saying that you voted for more military spending. You voted in favor of certain bills that would increase the deficit. And then you also heard Senator Bernie Sanders say that an economic stimulus is necessary during this COVID-19 pandemic, where many people have lost jobs and growing economic inequality continues. That's the senator from Vermont's perspective. So that was a really, really fascinating debate yesterday. We haven't really seen any of that today as much. It's just mainly floor speeches. We haven't seen a major debate of any kind here today. Also worth noting, yesterday, if you were joining, you probably had a chance to see Senator Ted Cruz and Senator Dick Durbin debating about Hong Kong refugees. You had Senator Ted Cruz saying that that this could be a gateway to possibly having individuals who may not be loyal to the country. And then you also had Senator Dick Durbin, who said that we're a country of immigrants. And I believe Richard Blumenthal actually said that, the other Democratic senator, saying that we should stand against the oppression of China while embracing immigrants. Senator Ted Cruz believes that China is a growing threat, and he even referenced some of his own bills that he wanted to pass that would penalize China and add sanctions to the Chinese government. So we had that yesterday. Today, a little bit of a different conversation. Again, the conversation's more focused on COVID-19 aid today, for sure. As time is running out, the countdown is coming, and time is running out for a deal on the coronavirus economic aid package. Another headline news for you today. The discussion of elected officials and COVID-19. We've seen elected officials get infected with COVID-19 this year. And hold on, let's go right to the Senate floor. Let's listen in. Enough of my commentary. I'll tell you that other story, but let's listen into the senator from Tennessee, the Republican senator from Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn. Let's listen in.
Needing targeted relief. Now, the Democrats have spent their year pushing off targeted relief. They've had their opportunities to tackle this issue. They have chosen not to tackle this issue. They have chosen to play politics with this issue. And so on the Saturday before Christmas, when we should be home,
Technical difficulties again. Let's get back to Senator Marsha Black.
C-SPAN thanks the cable and satellite companies who fund our public service.
see, the people back home are very frustrated with them. They seem out of touch. They seem to not care. They don't seem to be interested in taking care of people with needs that have been adversely impacted by COVID. They seem to be more interested in taking care.
Sorry, again, there's more technical difficulties. I'm trying to make this happen. Hold on one second.
C-SPAN.
Hopefully it will work right now.
Civic relief. And went with the HEROES Act. It was a very partisan bill. It contained provisions that had nothing to do with COVID relief, and that the House and the Senate Democrats knew were going to be stumbling blocks. Their bill was filled with things, nothing to do with taking care of people, but oh, they had it full of poison pills. Why? They wanted to make certain that relief didn't come. They wanted to make certain that they could run this out, get it past the election. And then we find out from Speaker Pelosi herself and from some of the other Democrats that are in leadership. Why did they do this? Oh, politics. It helped them with the election, they thought. So they used people as pawns. Now, that HEROES Act that they continue to like to talk about, it would have undermined state voter ID requirements, and it gave the green light to some ballot harvesting schemes. Isn't it interesting? What are we talking about? What are Tennesseans talking about so much? Yep, you got it. Ballots, elections, some of the harvesting, some of the tricks. Now, those items they had in the HEROES Act, they didn't have anything to do with targeted relief. But you know what? They were willing to play these games and to withhold that relief. Why? They thought that it helped them in winning an election. So that was all back in July. Then comes September 10th. The Democrats again blocked forward motion on another targeted bill, throwing a procedural hurdle in between the American people and desperately needed relief. They got by with it in July, so September rolls along. It's about time for people to start getting ballots, mailing in ballots. What do? Well, they decide to mess with it again, to play politics, to use people as pawns. They lowered the bar even further on October 21st throwing away $500 billion in targeted relief. They all voted no in an attempt to tear our focus away from another round of funding for small businesses, support for schools, and more money for COVID-19 testing. Now, think about this. Time and again, they say, oh, we've got to have more PPP. We have to have more unemployment insurance. We have to have more money for vaccines. We have to have more money for testing. We have to have more money for getting schools open. But they vote no. They have turned their back on the American people repeatedly. They did it in July. They did it in September. They did it in October. They have turned their back. Think about what a plus-up of unemployment would have done for a family had they decided to vote yes and work with us in July. That would have been a lot of money if they had that plus-up every single week through August, September, October, November, December. Now, I mentioned the October 21st vote. One day earlier, on October 20th, Democrats had blocked Senate action to extend the PPP. That is all of our small businesses, and yes, indeed, they are hurting. We are hearing from them on the phone, through email. They are begging for relief. But the minority leader threw another possibility of compromise out the window by again insisting that Democrats would accept the full HEROES Act or nothing. Isn't that amazing? That's what small businesses have gotten, is nothing. Because my colleagues across the aisle have basically said, give us everything we want, or we'll just vote no. We'll just leave people suffering. So it's not Republicans that have voted no. Republicans have consistently tried to help people, and my friends across the aisle are consistently trying to help themselves and use people as pawns. At the beginning of this month, the minority leader took to the floor again. He rejected targeted relief again. And he demanded that Republicans come to the table. Well, we've been at the table. They're the ones that reject proposal after proposal, don't want to move forward on things where there is agreement, want to hold out. They have not been paying attention to what is going on outside the four walls of this chamber. And they continue to say, we have to have money to bail out cities and states. Only they call it aid to cities and states, but it's bailouts for these big blue cities and states that were having problems long before lockdowns came along. And they have really made an uncomfortable spot for themselves because of irresponsible spending policies. And I know that Tennesseans do not want to see their tax dollars going to bail out people who have chosen to waste their taxpayers' dollars. And I can't help but wonder how much longer the Democrats are going to allow industries and small businesses and individuals to twist in the wind because they feel like this is a great time to push their socialist agenda. get us on that fast track. Oh, that's what they would like to do. And still, and you know, Mr. President, we had a hearing this week in Commerce Committee and had some of the venues in the live entertainment industry come before us. People that tend to these stages when the curtains go up, people that are working backstage. We heard from Michael Strickland out of Knoxville, whose company, Bandit Lights, they like these stages, help these shows look great. And you've got millions of people that are in these support industries. We heard from the motor coach industry. We have heard from some of these smaller venues. They are totally shut down. They were totally shut down when the country went into lockdowns. They were the first to be totally closed, and they're going to be the last to reopen. These are people joined by small business retailers and restaurants that can't open their doors, and small business manufacturers that have got to wait for the supply chain to kick back up so that they can reopen their production lines. And they are saying, we need the help. They're asking us, who is blocking it? Who is holding out? And we tell them repeatedly, they could have had relief in July, or they could have had it back in September, or a couple of times in October or November, or earlier in December. And it is not Republicans that have blocked that relief. Time and again, the Democrats have blocked Republican proposals to send funding where it is needed most. They've rejected every single lifeline that we have tried to throw. I think it's become clear that the Democrats in Washington, D.C. never really saw getting assistance to the unemployed, getting help to small businesses as a priority. Instead, they looked at this, they saw a crisis, they said, well, this is an opportunity. Let's not let this crisis go to waste. They have used it so that they can push their message, their agenda, do what the federal government says, or we will let you drown. So they know that their bills weren't meant to act as help. Maybe they were meant to be a push for their leftist agenda. They know that the emergency financial provisions of the CARES Act were never meant to replace private markets or be used as a mechanism to bail out state and local governments. But you know what? They're going to push to try to make it so, to further a leftist agenda. Crisis management is no substitute for fiscal policy. So I would say to our friends on the left, these tactics have failed. It is time to stop using the American people as pawns. Read your mail, listen to the phones. People want targeted relief that will help them to get to recovery. I yield the floor.
You just heard Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee criticizing Democrats, claiming that Democrats are trying to push socialism through here. And even at the end of the speech, you just heard saying that, Democrats are using their are using constituents as pawns. She does not approve clearly of the stimulus that the Democrats and the left are, or as she says, the left are pushing in regards to the $1,200 stimulus or $1,200 direct stimulus checks to American adults and the other views, other beliefs there. Here, let's listen into a rebuttal, I believe, from Senator Pat Toomey, not a rebuttal, Pat Toomey, Republican from Pennsylvania.
Financial crisis anymore, but we're experiencing a lot of economic hardship. It tends to be concentrated in certain sectors and industries, and we have a full-blown healthcare crisis. So it's a very, very serious moment, and it demands a response. I am hoping we can get that done as soon as possible. And I want to discuss one of the terms that I have advocated for in this legislation. The terms I've advocated for have been mischaracterized, including by the Senate Minority Leader and others.
The video feed stopped. We'll be getting right back to the Senate floor with Republican Senator Pat Toomey.
C-SPAN.
And why that was done. That we were in a healthcare crisis, and that was the response that was believed to be most likely to prevent an overwhelming of our healthcare capabilities that would have been absolutely horrific. And so we had this economic disaster, and what we discovered in March was this shutdown brought us to the brink of a financial crisis as well. If you think about the financial markets where people are providing capital to businesses and municipalities and individuals, they only do that if there is some confidence that they know, at least generally speaking, what the future looks like. We've never seen anything like the government shutting down our economy before. And so, not really shockingly, financial markets were on the verge of completely freezing up, shutting down, and preventing even the most basic functioning of our economy. I mean, businesses we might well have gotten to the point where a business couldn't go to its bank and borrow the money it needs to make payroll on Friday. Or they couldn't issue the bond that they need to do to pay off another bond that's coming due, and so that would put them in default and force them into bankruptcy and require them to lay everyone off. I mean, the knock-on effects would have been devastating had our financial system completely frozen up. And Mr. President, it was on the verge. Some would say it was actually in the process of freezing up. And so that's why the Treasury Secretary and the Federal Reserve Board governor came to Congress and said, look, we need some extraordinary, unprecedented new facilities that we can stand up very, very quickly, and we can use them to be a backstop, to restore confidence, and to enable private credit to start flowing again, so that this economic recession that we're certainly going to go through, back in March, it was clear that was going to happen, but it was not clear that we had to suffer through a financial crisis that would create a depression. That was something we thought maybe we can avoid. So these facilities were set up, as I say, to restore the normal functioning of private lending and private capital markets, not to replace those markets, not to pick winners and losers and decide, well, who gets credit and who doesn't, depending on whether we like their business, not to subsidize, not to say, well, look, let's just give cut rate loans to the people we like to give them to. None of that was the intention. None of that was the purpose. The purpose was to ensure that credit-worthy borrowers could access credit through the normal channels. That was it. That was the purpose of what's widely described as the 13-3 lending facilities. There were several of these facilities. That was the intention for these facilities. And guess what? They worked. They worked amazingly well, remarkably well. Within days, certainly weeks, markets were again functioning, credit was flowing. As a matter of fact, within a matter of months, credit was flowing at an all-time record pace. Corporate bond issuance hit an all-time record high across the credit quality spectrum. Municipal bond issues, all-time record high. Borrowers, businesses that wanted to keep their workers and continue to survive until we got past this COVID crisis, they were able to draw down lines of credit from their banks. It worked. The creation of these facilities gave the confidence to our financial markets that restored the normal functioning of those markets. It was really quite extraordinary. Now, that doesn't mean that the economy got perfect after that. Certainly not. The economy is not perfect today. But it meant that a recovery would be possible. We'd be able to function. We'd be able to begin to pick up the pieces of a closed economy. And sure enough, we've made tremendous progress. More than half of all the people who lost their jobs are back at work. So that's not anywhere near where we need to end up, but we're on the right track, in part because these facilities did exactly what they were designed to do. Now, what does my language in this bill does? What my language does is it puts an end to these three programs that did their job. They functioned, they restored the private credit markets, and so they don't need to continue. What are these three programs? There's a corporate bond credit facility, there's a Main Street lending program, and there's a municipal lending program. Actually, they were hardly used at all. So quickly did the normal private credit markets resume their normal functioning that very few borrowers took advantage of these. In fact, I'm pretty sure in the corporate market, I should say the corporate credit facility that was set up under these 13-3 facilities, I don't think anything was done at all. The Main Street lending, it was very little. Municipal lending, there were 2 borrowers. That's it. These are the programs that were funded by the CARES Act, were set up at the time of the CARES Act for this narrow specific purpose, and now they've achieved their purpose. By the way, there's lots of other programs that have been set up over time. Some were set up recently that my legislation doesn't touch in any way, shape, form, or fashion. The commercial paper funding facility, unaffected. Money market fund liquidity provision, unaffected. The paycheck protection program, primary dealer liquidity facility, untouched. All of them untouched. And quite contrary to what some have suggested, this is no big rewrite of the Fed's 13-3 lending facilities. Couldn't be further from that. What it is an acknowledgement that the 3 programs we created in March, and which, by the way, we put an expiration date on them in March. We said they end on December 31st. But now we have folks on the other side of the aisle who have a novel interpretation of the statute saying, oh, well, they don't really have to end. Or if they do end, we could bring them back to life. But we shouldn't even be having this conversation. But we are, because we've got this interpretation that we have to deal with. What my statute simply, what my language simply does is it follows the statute and calls for the end of this. How do we do this? There's 3 steps. One is we rescind the money that never got used because, as I said, the markets responded so quickly we never needed to use this money. And I think our Democratic colleagues agree on this provision. The legislation, my language that I'm trying to get in this package reiterates that these CARES facilities end on December 31st, as Congress intended. I was in the room when we were writing this bill, and nobody thought that any of these programs are going to last beyond the end of the year. But, as I say, because of this novel legal interpretation, we need to reiterate in an unambiguous way that they end on December 31st as Congress intended. And finally, we ensure that they can't be simply restarted next year or sometime thereafter or duplicated without congressional consent. Now, we have folks on the other side of the aisle who are raising all kinds of objections. They're very upset about this. And it's fair to ask, why would that be? Well, certainly isn't because the credit markets are back in turmoil and they think we need to restore the flow of private credit. That would be ridiculous. The credit markets are functioning as well or better than they ever have. It's not even a close call. So it's not that. No, what it is something very different, Mr. Chairman, and that is the problem that some of my colleagues want to morph these facilities into a use that was never intended for them. They want to convert them away from this temporary emergency liquidity facilities designed to stabilize markets and restore the flow of credit, to convert it away from that, and instead to use them to implement fiscal policy and maybe social policy, and certainly to allocate credit based on their political preferences. What is one of the ways that our Democratic colleagues would like to do that? One, they want to bail out irresponsible states. Now look, I get that there are some states across the union that have suffered financially because of COVID. There's other states that haven't been harmed at all. In fact, they've got more revenue coming in this year than they had last year. It varies, and there's definitely a category of state and municipalities that have suffered a loss of revenue. And we can and should have an ongoing debate in this body about what to do about that, if anything. But that's our responsibility. If we are going to send money to states and municipalities, we should have a bill, appropriate the funds, and have a vote in Congress so that the American people can hold us accountable. See, that's what happens. We get held accountable. And so when an action like that is done through legislation, it's out in the open, it's transparent, it happens in the light of day, and the American people know who to hold accountable. That's not what our Democratic colleagues want to do. They want to force the Fed to do this for them. And how do we know that? Because they passed a bill called the HEROES Act, H.R. 6800, that instructs the Federal Reserve to use the municipal facility for exactly this purpose: super long-term, ultra-low-cost loans to municipalities, up to 10 years, at 1/4% interest rates. And states wouldn't even have to attest that they couldn't secure ordinary credit. They could just show up and get it. So the Fed wouldn't be playing its role, its traditional role, as the lender of last resort in a financial crisis. They'd be the lender of first resort to their preferred constituency. There's the Main Street lending facility. If they could replicate that, who knows what kind of conditions they would impose on low-interest loans there, whether it's climate or other policies that ought to be debated on this floor and ought to be determined through an accountable process. So, as I say, none of this is speculative. Our Democratic colleagues have talked about this. They passed a bill that actually does this. It's ironic that when we were developing the response to the to the crisis of March, of earlier this year, some of our colleagues described this $500 billion fund that was intended to capitalize these vehicles that would lend and restore liquidity. They called it a slush fund. One of many examples, Senator Warren, on March 30th of 2020, said, "The CARES Act created," and I quote, "a $500 billion slush fund that Trump administration could use to help its political friends and punish its political enemies. And I think that's a bad thing," end quote. Well, now there's a new administration, and Now they want to keep the slush fund. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to complete my remarks before the vote.
Without objection.
Thank you. So this is a very bad idea for many reasons, not the least of which is to put the Fed in this position of being pressured to make these giveaway transactions based on a political pressure would completely politicize the Fed. It'd be the end of independence of the Fed. And this is why this has never been the role of our central bank, the Fed. We've never asked the Fed to engage in fiscal policy or promote social policy or to allocate credit based on political standing. That's guaranteed to politicize the Fed and undermine Fed independence. Fiscal and social policy is the rightful realm of the people who are accountable to the American people, and that's us, that's Congress. I want to address another accusation that's completely false and totally unjustified, and that is that somehow this is an effort to hamstring the Biden administration and prevent them from doing what they want to do. Let me assure you, Mr. President, and my colleagues, my efforts to ensure that this would be a temporary facility began when we began discussing the facility. It was in March that I was arguing, actually, I argued that we should have this end as soon as the financial markets had restored their normal functioning and no later than September 30th. I didn't win the argument. We ended up settling on December 31st. But that's when I started pushing to have a finite period of time and a short period of time. There was nobody in the room who thought that this was supposed to go on indefinitely. And once we started working on another COVID-related bill, started in the summertime, and I became aware of this alternative interpretation of the language, we put it in our bill and we voted on that in September. So this language, or the substantively similar language, has been public for many, many months now. I also want to stress that we're not making permanent changes to laws, and Congress can always act again. The CARES Act already made these facilities temporary. They were supposed to end at the end of the year. And of course, no change in law is ever permanent. Any future Congress can change it. Back in March, when this crisis hit, the Fed and Treasury knew that they needed to come to Congress for the tools to solve it. They came to Congress and we turned around in an extraordinarily rapid fashion these massive new facilities that had never been imagined before. We responded quickly. And if there's some kind of future event that calls for future set of facilities of this particular sort, they can come back to Congress. Mr. President, it's three facilities that were launched in conjunction with the CARES Act, funded by the CARES Act, and I'm saying they have achieved their purpose, they should come to an end, they should not be restarted, and a replica should not be created. That's all. Some have suggested that the chairman of the Federal Reserve has got some opinion on this. I would challenge anyone to find a statement in the public record that he has made in criticism of this. He's very well aware of what's going on. The last point I want to make, Mr. President. Some on the other side have suggested that our language is maybe too broad, and maybe it captures potential facilities that shouldn't be captured. If that is the sincere concern of my colleagues on the other side, I urge them, give me a call. It's very easy to track me down. If you've got an objection to the way we've worded this and you want a language that is narrower, I'm all ears. We could work this out. With that, I yield the floor.
The question is on the Deeps nomination. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Mr. Blunt, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mr. Braun,
Okay, you have just watched the United States Senate Saturday session. It's not over yet completely. It will be over at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in today. I have to go, unfortunately, but I'll be back tomorrow as we'll see if Congress can avert a shutdown. Can a shutdown be averted tomorrow? That will be huge, and we'll see the United States House of Representatives tomorrow, a rebroadcast from C-SPAN, a live rebroadcast tomorrow. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to this broadcast. Have a great day.